Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our weekly webinar. This week and the next 2 weeks, our focus is really going to be on showcasing the different consent management providers and the different tools that we have available to make use of our transparency and consent framework. And to kick us off in that, we have today got 3 different CMPs that will be presenting their tools. And those will be Consent Manager, Clickio's Consent Tool, and a mobile tool by Smart. And we'll be presenting them in that order. So first we'll have Jan Winkler presenting Consent Manager, then we'll have Alexander Azarov presenting Clickio, and then we'll close off with Stefan Ruffin with the Smart tool. The way we do these is we will have these 3 presentations in a row that will take 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And then with the remaining time in the hour, you'll have a chance to ask your questions. You can do that on the right-hand side of your screen. There will be a questions pane, and I will then read out and communicate your questions to the panelists. Since we're focusing on CMPs, it makes sense to try and keep your questions directed at each of the CMPs. But if you do so, could you please indicate to which panelist or to which CMP you're asking your question? That helps me as well in knowing who the question is for, or if you just have a general question about the framework, that's also welcome. But we would prefer, obviously, to make the best use of the time for our panelists and ask them questions. Since I'm going to be here pretty much every week, so you can always ask questions to Ivy Europe about the TCF. So with that said, I'm going to kick off and let Jan Winkler present his CMP, Consent Manager. Take it away.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to present our service. Yeah, as said, my name is Jan Winkler. I'm from consentmanager.net. Yeah, let's just go into this. Yeah, we were one of the first CMPs that actually went live. Now it's, I think, 100 CMPs on the list. At the beginning, it was only a handful. We were one of these. Actually, we are in the business, in the tech industry for more than 10 years now. So we're quite experienced in this case. Our solution is very simple to integrate. It's compatible with almost all ad servers that you can find out there. We've also tested it with many of them to make sure there's no problems. It's ready for desktop and mobile with a responsive design. It's robust and stable, tested with even some million requests per day. And we give you detailed reports and analytics, and the whole thing is fully customizable. It's also available in 25 languages. That's basically the 25 important languages for the European Union or the European economic area. So we have all of them covered. If you are from one of these countries, then you should see our consent screen in your corresponding language. If you're not from one of these countries or your browser settings are from, I don't know, Japan or something, then you will see English language as a default. How does this work? It's quite simple. You go into our interface, you set up your website, you design your text and everything. You get a code. You put the code in your website either manually. If you're using a tag manager, you can put it in the tag manager. You could even put it in your ad server if you want it, but it's not recommended due to some, let's say, legal aspects. And we also offer a WordPress plugin, which is even more easy for people who use WordPress as their CMS. That's it. You just put the code in the page on one of these ways. The CMP will then automatically start showing the consent screen to the users, and that's it. How does it look like? That's a screenshot of our CMP of one of the standard designs. I will just put my browser in here to show you an actual live example. So what we have is basically a box. If you see the other presentations from the other CMPs, it will more or less look the same. You have a box with a small text, one or two buttons. We prefer to have two buttons, so the accept and the reject button. Also due to legal legal issues or legal points of view, and always the user can also go to customize the choice, and then you will see the different proposals and the different vendors, and can go there and say, okay, I don't want this and I don't want this, and finally you can save and exit. The whole thing is fully customizable, meaning let me just put it back again. Meaning you can change the color, the font size, the font style. You can set if you want to hide the website, or if it should be visible, if the consent screen should be on top of the page or on the bottom or in the center or on the right side, left side, whatever. You can, as said, you can hide or show the buttons in order to basically not allow the reject button. Again, it's not recommended, but we support it. Some people want it, so we support it. You can do a lot of customizations. You can even change the text, and for sure you can add your logo in order to make it even more look like it's a thing which belongs to your website. Because I mean, it's obvious. If there's something popping up in your website and it's not looking like your website, then users might, leave the website and might get confused. So that's why it's a good idea to customize this as much as possible. With the CMP comes a lot of traffic insights or reports. We have very detailed reports which can be filtered and grouped by certain things like website, the country, designs that you're using, date, browser, etc. No matter what you filter or group, you will always see all relevant data, meaning all the metrics like page views, how many accepts you have, how many rejects, etc., and the bounce rate, so that you at the end fully understand, or hopefully understand, your traffic and get a better insight there. The system is supposed to automatically optimize the designs that you set up. So you can set up, I don't know, 5 designs or 10 designs, how much you want, with different styles, with different colors, try different things. And the system will then automatically rotate the designs. It's like an A/B testing. It will track which design has the best acceptance and bounce rates, or highest bounce rate, lowest highest acceptance rate, lowest bounce rate, and from this it will learn what's the best solution for which user, like for mobile user the one, for desktop user the other one, maybe for whatever, German users the one, and for French users the other design. So it will learn, and at the end it will know what's the best solution in which case, and therefore increase the acceptance rate on your website. The example, or the chart that you see on the left side here, is an actual example from one of our customers. The green or greenish path that you see here is the amount of page views. The blue one is the acceptance rate over the time. You can see that's the last 2 weeks, and you can see the first week was more or less the learning phase. The system, was gathering data, and once it had enough data, it started optimizing, and you can see the acceptance rate is at the end nearly twice as high. Yeah, that's this topic. What's important to mention is that acceptance is not the only factor to look at. Bounce rate is also important. I just took 2 designs from our clients. One is our design, one is our, the default design that we have. One of the default designs, in this case, it's centered on the page. The website is great so that you can't actually use it, and the 2 buttons are in different colors, highlighting the accept button. In this case, you get a higher acceptance rate. In this case, the website has 38% acceptance rate, but it also had a high bounce rate. A bounce rate means the user tend to leave the website instead of continue using it, which is not a good thing, obviously. On the other hand, the design number 2, it was a very small design. It was on the footer so that you can still see the rest of the website. Small font, the website not hidden. The acceptance rate is much, much lower. It's only 18% in this case, but also is the bounce rate much lower. So you lose less visitors. At the end, you need to ask you what's more important for you, a higher acceptance rate, because maybe you're depending on personalized ads. So it's a good thing to have a high acceptance rate, or maybe it's a good thing for you to have to keep your your visitors and have a low bounce rate. So if you searching for your CMP, it's always good to try different designs and not only focus on acceptance rate. Some other things that good to know. Our servers are stored in, or all data is stored on European servers. The data is encrypted so that nobody can, even if they somehow obtain it, can read it. We have a limit, or you can limit and whitelist the vendors that you show in the consent screen, so that you don't show all the, I think currently it's 180 or something vendors in the vendor list. That might be a bit too much for some of the users, so you can limit it. We also have an integrated pub vendors JSON feature, which allows you to remotely manage your pub vendors JSON if you want to use it. It basically brings you a little bit of higher GDPR compliance. Depending on how you see the law, it might be necessary for you. Others might think it's not necessary. We also have an ad blocking or postponing feature, which basically means that if you enable it, the ads on your page will not load until the user gave consent, and only if the consent is there, our system will automatically load the ads then, so it will postpone the ads. And coming soon to more new features. We are currently in beta phase with the mobile SDK integration for iOS and Android. So that will be soon. And also soon, we are currently working on a crawler, which will basically go on your website, see what kind of ads you're loading or which kind of third-party codes you have on your website, and will check what they are actually doing. For example, if the crawler is pretending not to give consent, will these third parties still set cookies and try to use the data, for example? If that's the case, then you will get an alert and you can react and talk to your partners there. Yeah, that's it. If you want to have questions or if you want to visit us, go to consentmanager.net or just call us or send us an email or add me on Skype. That's it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. That was great. As I wrote in the chat, if you want to ask your questions during the presentation, don't feel like you have to wait in case you might forget it. Just keep in mind that I won't answer them or I won't ask them to the presenters until we're all done presenting. So that was Jan Winkler presenting consentmanager.net. Now we're going to move to Alexander Azarov, who's going to present Clickio. You should have presenter now, so you can try.
All right.
There you go. All right, I see your screen.
Perfect. Thank you, and thanks for having us. My name is Alexander Azarov. I'm the managing director of Clickio. We're a London-based company, and we help independent publishers to manage all things related to programmatic. So first of all, I want to address why we actually developed the consent solution of our own. We work with hundreds of publishers of different sizes and from different markets, and not all of them could find their own consent solution or customize something that was available on the market. And we were looking thus to provide a very easy to use, ready to use solution that would cover a few requirements that we had. And those requirements were, first of all, no coding required to implement. Then we wanted to address the differences between the IAB framework's approach and Google's approach, at least initial approach. And we all know that Google's guidance came very late and technical specifications came very late. So existing CMPs that we saw on the market, they didn't address fully this integration and this gap between IAB and Google. And we wanted to make sure that all our publishers who use Google a lot, they were covered and they would comply with the new Google's policies and everything else. We also wanted it to be flexible in terms of consent interpretation. What counts as consent? If we think it's up to the publisher to decide, and in different markets there might be different opinions about this. Obviously, user interface should be customizable. Records of consent should be stored for compliance reasons, and we also need to understand what's going on in terms of reporting and insights. So having not found such a solution before the deadline, we decided to build something on our own. And right now we have it deployed across the network, hundreds of publishers, as I said. And we also have some interest from external publishers, even big publishers from various markets. So we decided to maybe present it a little bit more to the outside market as well. And I think the best way to show is to just show the live demo. We've set up, well, first of all, I'll start probably with the setup interface. I think it will be easier then to understand the demo. We have a few options. We have the button layout, which is a yes/no button. Obviously, the texts are customizable, but you have two buttons. And there is one button plus manage options version as well. You have a centered version, you have a bottom ribbon version. And if you choose the bottom ribbon, you can also choose whether you want to block the content or not and allow users to navigate the site without making a decision. And also, these are options to consider navigation as consent and consider scroll as consent. This is something that we see a lot of major publishers actually deploying on the sites. Not a lot of publishers actually require the clicking on the button, it seems, especially in some markets. So these settings will very much influence your revenue and your user experience on the site. So this is something to keep in mind. And towards the end of the demo, I'll also share some stats on how some of those combinations affect the consent rates, bounce rates, and such other metrics. In terms of ad settings, you can pause the ads while the user is choosing, or you can show non-personalized ads. This is, again, something that needs to be tested for different sites. Both options have their advantages and disadvantages. Design settings, you can change colors, you can add custom CSS. For our publishers, we usually provide this for them so that they don't need to do anything. We just tweak certain things that they want, or if they require some customizations that are not possible in the tool, we would do it through custom CSS. All the text, as I said, are customizable. So if I put something here, it will immediately be reflected in the preview on the right. You can do some basic font changes and insert links and such. And you can also change the layers of the pop-up that you see, so you immediately see how it will look like on the site. When you're done with the changes, you need to decide whether the changes were material enough to update the version. And if you update the version, then all the users will be prompted to choose again, obviously, according to GDPR. If what you are getting the data for changed, then they need to consent again. In terms of deployment, we just give a single line of JavaScript as a base option. So it's very simple. And once deployed, you can change settings and they will be reflected on the site in a few minutes. No need to change inline code on the site. However, for developers, we also provide technical documentation on how to integrate deeper with the site with callback functions and things like that. And there is also a link that allows user to change the settings or revoke consent, which is also obviously important for compliance reasons. Now I want to jump into the demo page. So this is something that's available on our site right now, and you can play with it if you want. It contains actual codes of the consent tool, and it also contains the DFP code as an example of an ad code. It doesn't show actual ads, but it has two line items targeted. One line item is only targeted to non-personalized users, and the other one has no such restrictions. And this green box shows whether our consent tool has information about you and about your choice. So right now, if I refresh the page, nothing will happen, and I'll see personalized line item because I consented. If I reset the choice and I refresh again, I will see the dialog in accordance with the setup. If I agree, the ad will appear. This is because we're now looking at the center blocking plus pause ads option. And again, if I reset the choice, I refresh, I click Manage Options, then I click Manage Partners. Oh, by the way, a lot of things can be customized, but things like a purpose text and how the vendors are presented in the list, this is not something you would be able to change. And this is for, again, compliance with the framework reasons. And also know that IAB partners are presented separately from the Google partners. This is because currently, for technical reasons, Google only allows to show personalized ads if all the vendors that you have in your settings are approved by the user. If just one vendor is disapproved, you would not be able to show personalized ads. And this is why the user can only choose the whole list of users. So if I disable all the Google vendors and save, then again, this is something that can be set up. There is a warning that you will still see the ads, even if you turned off personalization. If I click I agree, I see non-personalized line item. And another way to check for Google is if you type NPA in the developer tools, then you would see that NPA equals 1 is added to the request to Google. This means that we're actually requesting non-personalized ads. And this is something very important to check when you're implementing a CMP solution on your site. Another debug version for the framework is to check the consent JavaScript API. You can click on the link and get the DAISY bit. Also, you can click on the other function that is needed in the CMP JS API and see the full array. And you can see that everything is false because I rejected all the vendors. Now let's look at some other examples. So this one would be bottom end blocking. It works exactly the same way as the other one, it's just the appearance is different. What would be different is the next option, is when you see the bottom one, but you have an option of load non-personalized ads immediately. And again, you have an immediate load of a non-personalized line item. And last but not least, the action as consent option. So if I agree, the consent choice goes to registered. If I refresh, it's a personalized item. And yeah, the final one is action as consent. If I go to this version, my consent choice is unknown. I haven't made a choice yet. However, if I start scrolling, my consent choice is registered and a personalized line item is rendered, even before I clicked. Only if the publisher thinks that actions on their site, they are equal to consent. And obviously, the disclosures must be made in the pop-up itself. If I scroll further, there is an option to remove the ribbon altogether. If the user continues to navigate the site, then we don't need to show the dialog. So yeah, this is basically how it works with the live codes on the sites. And now I want to go back to the presentation and share some stats. So we also have reporting in our system. We have some basic just mobile device site level reporting in the system right now, and some more customized tailored reports we're making for our publishers by our BI team. And this is what we see across the network, some very typical examples of the outcomes from different settings. If you're using a 2-button layout, well, you see a lot of rejection rates. For some sites, it can be 70% rejections, for some sites 35%, but this is very significant and the effects on revenue are quite high. You would also see quite a lot of bounce rate, again, from 30 to 50%, well, maybe from 20 to 50% of users will bounce out if the site is blocked and they are required to make a yes/no choice. If you don't block the content, then again, you have this quite significant number of rejections, but the vast majority of users, they wouldn't decide. They would continue navigating the site without deciding. If you switch to agree, learn more, or agree more options, then your rejection rate plummets. It's very low. However, if there is no content blocking, you would still get quite a lot of people who would not do anything or not decide. However, if they decide, they obviously always decide towards the easier option in this case. And as can be predicted, for action as consent, almost all the users are consenting, and the bounce rate is low, and it correlates with the normal bounce rate of a site. The consent tool doesn't add anything on top of this. So yeah, this is the quick overview of the tool and our first results. There are other features that I haven't covered due to time restrictions. In terms of pricing, our solution is free for all publishers that we work with in any other way for optimization and monetization. It is also free to try for everyone. And we're still kind of negotiating with different publishers on the price, but we feel like we're very, very competitive, and we're charging by page views. So thank you. The tool is available now, and the demo page is available now at gdpr.clickio.com. Please get in touch with us and at gdpr@clickio.com. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Alexander. I see quite a lot of questions came in there, but just to stick to the format, I'm going to now pass the presenter mode to Stefan, who's presenting from Smart. We can see your screen, but we can't hear you yet.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Perfect.
Perfect. So let's start. Thanks for attending this presentation of the Smart in-app consent management provider. So first of all, who are we? So Smart is a global full stack monetization platform for web, desktop, and mobile, and in-app. We have 10 offices around the world. In Europe, our headquarters is in France. We are also in the US, LATAM, and China. We focus only premium publishers. We are huge on in-app, as we started providing solutions in 2009. So just to be clear, we provide an ad server and SSP to our publishers. So why did we decide to build our own CMP? So when we asked our publishers around March if they were ready regarding GDPR and if they were aware about all communications around Google and so on, none of them were ready at all. So there was a big risk of loss of revenue for our publishers and also for us, of course. So, and what we have seen as well at that time is that existing CMP for in-app were web-based. And problem is that user experience is really key for our publishers, and us as Smart, we see a deep link between user experience and monetization. And so web-based experience on in-app are not optimal. So that's the reason why we decided to develop our native CMP, so a native CMP for iOS and Android. As we really think that standards are key because they make life easier, we decided to be, since the beginning, IAB compliant with the framework. We also decided to provide an open source SDKs for our publishers for more transparency, for more customization, and also to provide something free, as it is not our core business to develop a CMP. We wanted also to provide a fully independent CMP from any third-party SDK because we want any publisher to be able to use our CMP, and on in-app, the IAB framework enables this. So we'll see how it works. First of all, what does our CMP do? It's really, really simple. Once installed into an app, each time a new updated vendor list is available, a user consent is requested. Depending on the user choice, a consent string is created following the IAB specifications. Then this consent string is stored into the user preferences as defined by the IAB specifications. And that's all. That's the unique goal of our CMP. So of course, I said at the beginning that since a new updated vendor list is available, the user consent is requested. So it can be done automatically or can be done as the publisher wants. Okay, we give everything to the publisher to decide the way he wants to handle this. What's the idea behind? It is that any kind of third-party SDK which is IAB framework compliant can access to the user consent without having to have any technical links to the CMP. Such an SDK, for instance, our monetization SDK, which is IAB compliant, just has to look for the IAB's keys into the user preferences, and that's it. It can access to the consent and pass it to its buyers. So let's have a quick demo of this CMP. So, sorry. Okay, so this is the code that has to be implemented into the app. So basically, it's almost one line. Here you see many lines because we do not provide any text to our publishers. So, and here it is hard-coded as it is a demo. It can be done in a smarter way, of course. But basically here, what we see is just a call to our CMP and the legal text to be implemented by the publisher and some labels to be also done by, written by the publisher. So let's see the demo of the app. So here it is a demo app where you can see when we open this app, a first screen view. In this screen, the publisher can add its logo, can add its legal text. And what we provide is for the user two ways, a button, which is the blue button, which is a quick way for a user to accept and to agree and to give his consent. That's what here in this first demo we do. And at the end, what the CMP will do, it is to create a consent string stored into the user preference of app. But the user can also click on a link, privacy settings, to choose and have more details regarding purposes and vendors. So here in that case, he chooses this to deactivate a purpose. And here you can access to the list of vendors and access for each vendor to any details, such as the privacy policy and so on. Since the user accepts and validates his choices, the CMP will create a new consent string. And so you can see here that there is a little difference regarding the first one, as the consent has been modified by the user. And this consent is stored into the user preference of the app. That's it for the demo. So what are, to be fully transparent, what are the limitations of this CMP? So today we do not have implemented the pub vendor.json file, because when we released our CMP, it was not, the specification was not finalized, but of course it is in our plan for next release. We do not provide a GDPR applies feature to our publishers. The same, it was to quickly provide something to our publishers. So any kind of user, even if they are not in Europe, will see this CMP the first time. Of course, the publisher can implement its own solution, but it's also in our plan to have this feature available for publishers. In terms of localization, so everything coming from the vendor list is localized, but we do not provide any text or localization for buttons, labels, and so on, so it has to be done by the publisher. As we are on in-app, there is no cross-app consent, which is not the case on web. On web, it's possible to have a global consent. Here, it's not possible just because iOS and Android do not let us do it. The unique solution would have been to do it on server side, but it's not our choice. As you have seen, the UI is quite simple, but as it is an open source code, it can be fully customized by the publisher. And what we want also is that if someone is using a forked CPM based on our CPM, this publisher will have to register as a new CMP, of course. Just to finalize this presentation, so where do you find this CMP? So in Smart GitHub, so there is a link for iOS, another one for Android. If you want to play with this CMP, you can download our Smart Showcase app on both app stores. And just as a key takeaways, important to have in mind that this CMP is fully native for the best user experience as possible for our publishers. It is fully IIB transparency and consent framework compliant, and it is open source and free. That's it. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, I was just trying to figure out the screen sharing, but I won't have anything to show. So now we can move on to the questions and answers section. So I'm just going to read out some of the questions somewhat in order of when we got them, but I might also jump around a bit if there were questions that I feel are more important to answer or were already answered in the presentation. So one of the first questions that came in during Jan Winkler's presentation, and I think this was related to the figures you were showing, Jan, about accept rates, came in from David Dabbs, who asks, are these accept rates typical of your customers' experiences? And does it mean that only that percentage is allowed to receive any advertising?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, the numbers vary very much between the clients. We see clients that have lower numbers. We have clients that have higher numbers. As I tried to display, some of our clients look or have a broader future, broader look on the bounce rate, so they're more focused on this. So for them, the acceptance rate is not so important, and they choose a design which has a lower acceptance rate. So yes, the numbers that I showed were actual numbers from one of our clients, but it's not 100% typical to all clients. In regards of the question, if I may show ads, that's a bit, let's say, how you understand GDPR. There's a lot of gray area, a lot of fuzziness in there. So you definitely are allowed to continue showing ads if the user did not consent, but the ads may not use personal data or process personal data. For example, cookies is a problem or can be a problem. IP addresses, using IP addresses can be a problem, such kind of stuff. So as said, depending on how you understand the law, you either should remove all the ads from the page or you just remove the personalized ads from the page.
Thanks. I think that also fits in some of what Alexander was showing as well. And then another question, just quickly for you, Jan, since the others mentioned it, but you didn't. Benjamin Bureau wanted to know how much does it cost to use consentmanager.net?
So the pricing starts at 2 cents per 1,000 page impressions, and gets lower with each, I think, 50 million page impressions. So if you have 50 million, it gets a bit lower. If you're 100 million, it gets even lower. And it also comes with a minimum cost of 50 euros per month, meaning if you only have, I don't know, 100 page impressions, then we will still charge you 50 euros for the for the effort of creating the invoice. If you have more page impressions, then we will only charge you for what you're actually doing. So 2 cents is the starting point, and then it gets lower with the higher volumes.
Okay. And then I'll jump to a question now that was I think directed at Clickio, but I think it's an interesting thing, and maybe the other CMPs also have an opinion on this. And it comes in from Jennifer Musto, who asked, wouldn't consider navigation consent or scroll consent not be compliant with the GDPR? And I think someone else asked this very similar question as well. Yeah, Corey Schnur also asked, is action as consent good enough for GDPR compliance? Before the CMPs give their answer, I just want to say from a general policy perspective, the transparency consent framework does not tell you what is considered an action. And the reason that is because this will depend on national authority interpretations of the law. In one country, an unambiguous action might mean a yes or a no button only. In other countries, further browsing on a website, such as navigating to the next page, would be considered. And we've even heard also from some authorities that scrolling down the page, as long as it's properly indicated, could also signify an affirmative act. So the reason there's no hard rule on this is because the law itself only requires an affirmative action indicating unambiguously that the person consented. And the margin of what that means will depend on national regulators. So I don't know if any of the CMPs want to weigh in on how they see this issue.
Well, you pretty much covered it, and we have this similar position. In terms of we want to watch how it is being interpreted, and first of all, how it is interpreted right now by publishers, because all our publishers, they need to make choices, and they look at other industry leaders in their markets and how they implement. And this was the feature that we had not implemented prior to the deadline, and we added on the 25th of May, actually, the scroll as consent. And this was done because a lot of publishers were pursuing this route, and especially in markets like Italy, for example, it seems like everyone is more or less convinced that certain navigational or scrolling actions are considered consent. And we have more controls for the publishers. For example, you can control how long a user needs to scroll for this to be considered consent. And also in our records, we differentiate between clicking a button and scrolling or navigating. So in the log data, in the raw data, you will see the difference between those actions.
Okay, sounds good. I'll read out a question that was directed at Smart. David Dabbs, again, he asks, the IAB vendor list.json is being updated daily, and it probably will be for the considerable near future. Does that mean that with the Smart tool, users might be prompted daily?
So the publisher can decide. So it can be automatically. In that case, it will be done daily. If the publisher decides to make its own decision and decide to show it again only in a weekly frequency, it's also possible. Okay, so it's totally open. But in my mind, to me, the vendor list was updated every week and not every day. But it may have changed. I don't know. But once again, the publisher can decide.
Yeah, I'll just weigh in here as well. But I mean, currently, obviously, it's been 2 weeks since GDPR, so we're still seeing a huge surge of vendors signing up, and therefore the updates are taking place daily. But as more and more of the ecosystem is signed up and verified, we expect at some point, at least, that the updates will not happen on such a frequent rate. But that will depend on how many vendors end up signing up. I had a question that came in for Clickio. In the Clickio setup, do they work with all the major demand sources, or is it mainly focused on the DBM demand? That's a question that comes in from Stuart Austin.
So we focus on two, say, vendor categories. One is all of those who participate in the IAB framework. And because it's standardized, once we support the framework, all the vendors who join the framework should read the consent signal and will make appropriate decisions in terms of which ads they're showing. And Google was specifically highlighted because they are not currently a part of the framework, and hopefully by the end of summer they will be. But currently they require a special integration, and almost all of our publishers, they work with Google, and they would want to make sure that they're complying with Google's requirements. And one of the requirements, for example, is that all vendors who might participate in ad serving or measurement through Ad Exchange must be declared. But currently, they're not even all in the vendor list of the framework. So it's impossible to do just by showing the vendor list. This is why we need to show two lists and kind of have a logic of how user choice is propagated between those two lists. Yeah, so we are working across the marketplace with all the IAB vendors and with Google.
Okay, and then just a quick follow-up, since this was also mentioned, the big keyword is out there. Since Google has stated their intention to become part of the framework, will your product look different once they are part of the framework, or is it going to, are you going to keep this separation?
No, we're planning to obviously simplify everything for our publishers, for users, and for ourselves. Once Google fully integrates with the framework, there will be no need to have this confusing two lists. It will be just one list, and Google will support granularity on the vendor level, and yeah, life will become simpler.
Okay, thanks for that. Question for Jan Winkler again. What data does Consent Manager actually store related to the user's consent records, as well as related to any other data that the website has collected about them, such as for addressing the right of access or erasure? So did you get that, or do you want me to break it down a bit?
Not sure if I'm 100% get it. So basically, what we store, maybe from this perspective, we store, obviously we store a consent log, we store a timestamp and this kind of stuff. So the data that we have from the user, basically the browser data, the technical data, we will store in order to prove that it was this user and not somebody else. Besides that, we collect reports. That's group records, so it's not identifiable by users for various data, things like which browser, which device type, which website was visited, and accept rates and this kind of stuff. So the consent log or the protocol is basically the network data or the tech data that's readable about the user, and the report is non-user specific, all the other data that we get.
Okay, I'm going to take a question here that just came in for both Smart and Clickio. Do you consider that Google's involvement as an approved IAB CMP vendor might be a threat for your business with your partners that only use DoubleClick for publishers?
I can guess be the first. So we are an ad optimization company. So we actually work with Google, and we're a partner of Google, as well as a lot of other vendors on the marketplace. So for us, it would not be a threat. And the main reason why we created the CMP was also to help our publishers comply with all those diverse requirements. Even if our CMP is replaced entirely by something else, it's not a threat to our business.
So regarding Smart, Google, of course, is one of our first buyer in our SSP. So the first day of the 25th, we have seen a huge drop but everything came to normal on Monday, because the Monday after. But we had so I'm not sure to have understood the question, but I know that there was no drop on DFP users, and we have seen it as a real let's say to be nice, a real strength position of Google. Okay. But today everything is back to normal, but what is really important for our publishers is to understand that today a lot of buyers, DSPs, are not really GDPR compliant. So we had to adapt many things depending on each buyer, but it's really important for our publishers still to use a CMP, because the day buyers will be fully ready and fully GDPR compliant, it may have a huge impact if they have not implemented a CMP on their site. So we really continue, and we have an internal objective to have all our publishers having integrated a CMP. It can be ours, it can be another one. But today, no huge impact, but it may have an impact the day that when all buyers will be fully GDPR compliant.
Okay, thank you guys for that answer. Jan, I have another question for you that came from earlier in the webinar. Does ConsentManager.net use single-site consent or consent for groups or website, or is there even global consent possible?
Yeah, both or all the three at the end. It depends on the settings. The IAB CMP framework says that if you are not using the full vendor list, but only a subset, or you make any changes, then you must use website-specific consent. So you will be asked on each website. If you don't do it, so if you're using the full vendor list, for example, then our CMP will basically check if there is a consent existing from other CMPs or from our CMP, and the user will not be asked again. So that's the very short version. There's more into it, but that's the short version.
Yeah. And I'll just go to some questions which I think are directed at all of you. First of all, question for any of the vendors. I think that means any of the CMPs here. Is there any data on the percentage of users which actually customize their settings by specifically enabling or disabling vendors? Yeah, I mean, I think all of you might be able to speak to this if you have that information. I think we saw some of it in the presentations as well.
Yeah, if I just start, I think we didn't count it, but I think it's half of our customers who actually use only a subset of vendors, so a whitelist of vendors, and the other half basically goes with the full vendor list.
Sorry, was the question about the end users who would go and customize the vendor list, or about publishers?
As I understand it, it's about the users, the end users, what they're essentially what is the opt-in rate.
Okay.
Yeah, so in this case, oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
Then I just put my number in. So we see a very, very low number, let's say a percentage or maybe 2%, but not more.
Okay.
Yeah, we see the same single digit, low percentage.
The same at Smart.
So low percentage of opt-ins, full opt-ins, or
of users who would customize vendors.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah,
will actually go and customize. Yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting to know. I'll remember that figure anecdotally. Then a question which is for me, but I need to ask all of you guys actually. Will I be able to distribute all the decks to all the attendees after the meeting? I will definitely include links in the follow-up email to this to each of your websites. But would you all be willing to share the decks that you used?
Yeah,
sure. Of course.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, fantastic. Then let's see if another question came in. Hang on, let me see. So I guess we can just close on that. I don't see any more specific questions for each of the CMPs. And as I said, I'll circulate the text as well as the contact of our panelists today. And if there's anything you want to follow up with them personally or directly, you can do so. Once you have their contact, you may have even taken it down during their presentations. But with that, I would say thank you all for joining. Thank you especially, of course, to Alexander, Jan, and Stefan for coming in to present your solutions. And good luck to everyone with the GDPR in general. And hope you guys enjoy your weekends.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you too.